All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the One Up Sales Development Podcast. For today's guest I got for you guys is someone truly special. This person is not within the States. He is our awesome neighbor. This guy's been in sales for quite some time. He's known as an awesome sales leader, sales professional, and he was also ranked on LinkedIn's top 100 sales stars for 2020. He is no stranger to danger when it comes to supporting the SDR and AE community. So this guy started out from the bottom of the list. He started out as an SDR from himself, which I got a lot of respect for when people come from the front lines, because if you're going to a marriage counseling, right, you wouldn't want to go to someone who was, well, never married before. So this person, he worked his way up the ranks over at Uberflip, jumped over to Shutterstock. He is a member of Revenue Collective. He is also the founder and sales coach of Galiano Ventures. Please give me a warm welcome for the one and only Mr. Michael Galiano, head of sales SMB over #paid.
Hey, Jackson. Amazing to be here with you. Woo! Feel amazing.
Michael, thank you so much for hopping on the One Up Sales Development Podcast. I can't tell you how excited I am to finally meet you. You know, we've been touching base for quite some time now, just dropping knowledge and asking, give and take for each other, and just literally just supporting each other. And not only that, and you're our neighbor. You're from Toronto, Canada. So welcome to the pod, man.
I'm so happy to be here, and I love the energy. I'm ready to bring the energy too. I've had 3 espressos today. I'm feeling high energy, and yeah, from Toronto, Canada, neighbor to the north. I'm glad to be here, and I gotta say that ever since we got connected on LinkedIn, I've been extremely impressed with what you put out, and more than anything else, the consistency of value, and like Gary Vee would say, the jabs, and just so helpful. Your consistency is amazing. So that's why I always want to talk to you, and glad to be on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Michael. Really happy to have you here, man. And I love what you're doing too. You're helping a lot of SDR and AEs within your area and above. And just knowing that you came from the SDR role yourself, that's like validated credibility, so yeah, glad to be here. Michael, so sorry to cut you off there. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna add, I didn't know it at the time, and excited to jump into the story with you, but it turned out that starting point that you mentioned, the SDR role, was looking back an incredible starting point to my full-time career. So I'm excited to jump into that with you.
Yes, please. So Michael, without further ado, for our audience listen here, why don't you go ahead and just give us a brief background about pretty much, how'd you got into sales, and what do you currently do right now at #paid?
Starting with what I'm doing today, I lead our SMB sales team. I joined just under 2 years ago, and we're a creative marketing platform. So most would know this space as influencer marketing. You've got your big influencers and small influencers on Instagram, and we're a SaaS platform that helps brands automate it and scale those programs. So I joined a couple of years ago to help shift our company from an agency to a software company. And we launched our SaaS platform just under a year ago. And it's been an amazing opportunity. It's been an amazing ride. So I support our account executives and work with our head of marketing to support our SDRs as well. I got into sales, to answer your second question, coming from a marketing background. At the time, I was finishing up at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, Ontario, which is an amazing tech hub and startup hub. And I had, like a lot of university students, a little bit of free time on my hands. So I got together with 2 of my buddies at the university, and we launched a Kickstarter project. And we were both fascinated. All 3 of us were fascinated by Kickstarter. Can we create something can we sell something, and can we do all the distribution, almost like a mini e-commerce business. And so we came up with this idea called Wise Words, which were handcrafted and hand designed postcards with some of the greatest minds of history, from philosophers to scientists to historians, musicians. We created these cards. We ended up blowing past our goal. And so I was really excited about being able to sell these cards to thousands of people. And I had at the time wanted to get into marketing. So I applied to a marketing role at a startup called Uberflip. At the same time, I was in San Francisco interviewing with companies. I was pretty excited about moving to San Francisco, so I stayed on a buddy's couch, interviewed with a bunch of startups. One startup called Skills, interviewed at Yelp in 2013, and a bunch of other companies, and ended up deciding to take the role at Uberflip. They said, "We like you, but have you considered sales?" And at the time, I thought sales was, I didn't know anything about sales. I'd never heard of the SDR role. I said, what's an SDR? They said, "We're hiring our first one. Meet our director of business development." I said, "What's business development?" And I met with him, and they said, if you can sell cards, you can sell our product. And so they wanted me to join. I ended up meeting with him. We hit it off. That was John Zifkin, who was a great mentor and got me started. And then I joined the SDR role as the first SDR, and there were 2 AEs at the time. So we had an amazing first year with a lot of ups and downs.
Nice. Man, that was amazing. I love that. So you actually really got your first gig as an SDR over at Uberflip. So what does Uberflip do?
Uberflip's a content experience platform. So helping B2B companies basically revamp their content hubs on their website, their resource centers, into really engaging content experiences. I'm kind of seeing if I still know the pitch 5 years later here. I definitely sold enough to hopefully remember, and helps companies convert leads based on people consuming content, almost like Netflix style. You consume an article, and we'll recommend something else that you might like a video, and then the lead would be converted there. So
Gotcha.
I joined just as the platform was being launched, and there was no SDR manager, there was no sales process, there was no handbook. There was just create a spreadsheet of leads for yourself and start calling alphabetically from A to Z. And now I know, going back, I would do it a little bit different. But I definitely spent the first few months just getting a ton of rejection. Was pretty scared of cold calling. I'd kind of hide in a room in the office and make all my calls because I was embarrassed, and it took a lot of practice. And 4 or 5 months later, I was confident to do it at my desk, which was actually a pretty big learning experience, because I'm sure you've had that feeling when you're making calls, the office is quiet, everyone is listening, and the call goes horrible. The whole office hears you, right? It's a bit scary.
Oh shit. Okay, Michael, you just gave me a flashback right now. And this was my internship over at ADP, right when I just graduated from college, and I left T-Mobile in the Long Beach region. And I remember, so the office is really nice, right? They just moved into a brand new office. You walk in, it's a open concept, standing desk that goes up and down. But they also had a lot of private rooms, and a lot of the interns. I never did that myself because I was like hammer hungry and stuff already. But there was a lot of people that, especially they were new, they just came in and they're just calling and dialing the speaker, and they literally just like go and hide in their shell, and they just go in that room themselves and just start making their calls there in the room because they had that fear. They're embarrassed. They didn't want people hearing them, like failing and just not really know how to code call right. So I know exactly what you mean. But once you break down that shell, so let's dive into that. So here you are, you're at Uberflip, you're starting at SDR. And I'd imagine, like, since you mentioned you guys start from lead list from A to Z, and you're just printing it out. There was no dialer solution like how we have today. And were you manually dialing at the time, just with the phone, just banging it out?
Manually dialing, manually emailing, and I think it took some time, but I started to create a process where we didn't have any sales loft or outreach just yet, but we use some tools. I forget the name of the tools, but just different ways. I think there were plugins into Gmail to help to automate some emails, and I kind of learned by doing, and then started to just absorb as much as I could from the AEs and learn to network. And by that time, I had kind of become a master networker from my time at university, where I launched an entrepreneurship club and ran a bunch of events. And so I was really good at networking, and kind of doing outbound and using LinkedIn. And so I started to create our first SDR process for myself, because I needed to. And then eventually we made our first inbound SDR hire, and I got to share some of that process with her. And eventually that became a team of 20 SDRs,
Oh, wow.
a year and a half later. So it was a great experience building from scratch, creating a sales process that we could start to use and start to build from there. And I think the point where I moved to the next role was when, I'd be passing leads or passing opportunities to my AE, Patrick, and he would say to our VP, Michael's passing opportunities that are ready to close. There's not much work for me to do. I think it's time for you to consider promoting him, which was about 14 months later. And so I'm glad that, I spent over a year in the SDR role. It's not about spending the longest time possible, but you do want to spend at least a year. You rarely are going to go back to the SDR role once you get promoted. So spend the year and a half, 2 years, and use that as a foundation for an amazing business career. And looking back, I've been a part of 4 different companies with SDR teams, and you always meet SDRs that want to leave the role, the day they get into it. And while I acknowledge that it's a really difficult role, one of the toughest roles in the organization, and I saw that firsthand, you get so many valuable experiences from running a process, to copywriting, to research, to content creation. It's not just about cold calling and cold emailing. That, spending that year and a half is valuable, not just to become an AE, but to become a marketer or a CSM, or start your own business if you want.
Yeah, definitely. I love that, man. That was amazing. So, Michael, I just want to go a little bit deeper on this. So, Uber Flip, you mentioned you were in San Francisco. You're on your buddy's couch and just interviewing around. Is Uber Flip, is that in San Fran, or is that in Toronto?
That was back in Toronto at home.
Okay. And so, where was the time frame when you were in San Fran interviewing around? Was this when you're leaving Microsoft, or I'm just trying to get a clearer picture?
Yeah, exactly. So I just finished my 8-month co-op term at Microsoft. I had one last 4-month term at Laurier. I ran the Kickstarter campaign, and then towards the end of that December of 2013, I was starting to interview at startups. I left Microsoft, with a love of tech, but knowing that I got to be at a tiny company, because I want to know the owners. I want to operate like an owner and think like an owner and have accountability. And I just wasn't able to get that at Microsoft with 100,000 team members, right? And
Yeah.
and so I ended up, when I was interviewing with Uberflip, also booked a ticket to San Francisco, spent a week there, met with a bunch of companies, flew back, and then made my decision. Do I want to go through the visa route and try and land in San Francisco, or do I want to take this opportunity here? And they were willing to give me some equity too. That was important to me. Like I mentioned, thinking and operating like an owner has been a consistent for me throughout my career, something that I learned from my dad and my grandfather. And so the fact that Uberflip was willing to give me some significant options with a great vesting schedule as well, I decided to take the opportunity to take that role and to stay in Toronto. And Who knows if I'll one day work out of California, but now with, work from home, we can work for really any companies from wherever we are, any company from wherever we are.
Yes. Yes. Wow. Michael, man. Okay. So I love that. And this is like 7, 8 years ago when you're at Microsoft and you already had this thought process in your head, and you said, hey, I'm at a Fortune 500. This is good and great. There's benefits and salaries and stuff, but I really want to get a closer relationship working side by side with the leaders within the organization. And I know exactly what you're talking about, because I started out, I worked out for a previous company too, where, for instance, like at retail T-Mobile, where I'm just gonna give that example out. And there's just like no relationship straight from the down front lines to all the way up to like the high level VPs and directors. And now working over with David Delaney at Tenbound, I'm literally working side by side with him, and we're literally just bouncing ideas off each other's head when it comes to like go-to-market strategies and things like that. And I really like you really are making a difference within that company's stuff. And what I really love about you is that, again, this was like 7, 8 years ago. You flew over to San Fran and you you went around, interviewed, met a lot of people, and really went back and found out with the Uber flip and said, hey, I'm just going to stick with this. And I think that's a really, really, really great thought process that you have. And that's how leaders think.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I remember one moment at Microsoft where I wanted to get a mentorship session with our VP, who was a few levels above me, and I had to reach out to her assistant and book time for, I think, like a month and a half from now. And her office was about five steps from where I sat in my cubicle, and I'm like, you're right here. And I see you in there. We need to spend. I got to wait a month and a half just to talk to you, and even she's not the owner. So I think that's been a great decision. And I wrote an article about this on my blog a couple months ago. But I think one of the reasons why equity and ownership is so important is because I like to think really long term and take the benefit of compound interest, not just financially, but with what I'm doing. And so if I can work and build real equity in a few different areas of my life and think really long term, then I can make a decision that will pay off much more significantly. And so that means more access short term, more risk, because all the companies I was at could have gone out of business pretty quickly. But I think it's been the right decision, which is why I want to start a business, and then it's something that's always important to me.
Yes. I love that. Okay, so what you just told me right now, I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. Are you familiar with Simon Sinek?
I am.
Yeah. Okay. So he told a story. I'm not sure if you heard of it yet. But so I listen to a lot of his motivational speeches too. He's a really great storyteller. And one of his stories says, talk about it's in regards to leadership, right? So here you are trying to book time with this person that's literally just 10, 20 feet down from you. And it's like, hey man, you want to book sometimes, you gotta do like a month and a half in advance, And the thing that he said in the story is that, let's say if you guys are working at a corporation, and let's say it's me and you, right? And we are working on a project together. And this is like, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into it. You were working late nights and over the weekends. Let's say it's like a go-to-market strategy that we're working on, or that you're working on, and you want to propose it to the upper management. And then you would send me an email and be like, hey, Jackson, I just worked on this project and I was hoping I would get your thoughts on that when you're available. And rather than just emailing back, like, sure, send it over, let me take a look. If we were working like literally 20, 30 feet down in the same floor, Simon Sinek said, you should literally just walk 10 feet down from your cubicle and said, hey, Michael, I'm here. Let's see it together. And right there is just having that human connection and really just being there for each other, Then just, yeah, man, send it through the email.
Yeah. You're totally right, and I probably should have just gone into the office and like we gotta meet sooner.
Yeah.
But that's
No, no worries.
that's a really good lesson, and I'm a big fan of what he writes about the infinite game. I actually, in that blog post I was talking about, I actually mentioned his latest book and playing infinite games. So a lot of great lessons from him.
Nice. I love that. I love that. So I haven't dig into that yet, but it seems to me like you dug into the infinite game. Is that right?
Yeah, and the biggest takeaway to in case you don't want to read the whole book,
Yeah, let's hear it.
the,
I was
the
gonna
the
ask you.
biggest takeaway is the difference between finite games and infinite games, and this isn't just for business, but this is for life in general. The difference is that with a finite game, people operate as if, let's say you're playing a basketball game. There's winners, there's losers, there's an endpoint. And so if you play a finite game in the game of life, you operate like with everyone around you, like there's a winner, there's a loser, and there's an endpoint. And at the end of this game of life, there's going to be a winner. And so it means that you take advantage of people, that you don't think long term, that you cheat, or you don't do the right thing by people. You're not ethical. You're not doing it for the love of the game. Whereas infinite games, people operate and realize that at the end of life, when we all die, no one's crowning the winner of life, right? Even when basketball players retire, they are no longer basketball players. They go on and do something else. And so don't define yourself necessarily just by the game that you're in at the moment, but operate as if there is no winners and losers. Do it for the love of the game. Otherwise, you're never going to be happy. You're always going to be, complaining or worried about, when is it the weekend versus just enjoying the moment that you're living. And he gives a great story of, you see at the Olympics sometimes, let's say it's the something like the Jamaican bobsled team who comes and they're not necessarily expected to win, or you have a smaller country that competes and they end up in 15th place. The camera pans to them and they're so excited with 15th place because they didn't come to the Olympics expecting gold, and they're disappointed because of that. They decided to practice and they did it for the love of the game, for that sport, whatever the sport is, and they're happy with 15th place because they realize at the end of our life there's no winners or losers. So I think that's a great lesson, and just helps you to think about how to operate every single day. That if I try and cheat, if I try and compete with my coworkers, if I steal territory and leads from my coworkers, what good is that going to get me in 10 years or 20 years?
Yes. Oh my God. So if that isn't the price of admission, I don't know what is. And we're just getting started. Michael, I love that, man. Just being in there for the love of the game. And goes back to the famous quote for here in the US too, especially with when it comes down to like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, is about Will Smith. And I remember there's these episodes and there's a quote where he comes and says, "Hey man, don't hate the player, hate the game." And those are just winners just for the love of the game. And it doesn't matter if they win or lose or get first place or second. It's like, I'm in it for the process and the journey. And hey, I'm here. Man, I love that, man. Okay. Michael, so I like to ask you something real quick. And I just want to pick your process of this. So you were at Microsoft, but you were in marketing. What made you jump to sales? That you figured out that marketing is not for me. I'd rather do sales. What happened there? I just want to pick it real quick.
Yeah, I think it was the co-founder of Uberflip and the VP of marketing saying, we saw that you can sell this Kickstarter campaign and generate thousands of dollars, but you're not necessarily qualified for this marketing role, which needed, a bunch of experience, certifications that I didn't have. But they saw that I had a lot of grit and passion and made things happen. I was a man of action, I guess. given that I came in, I proved that I could sell with this Kickstarter campaign, and that I don't wait for things to happen to me. I go out and happen to things. And so they kind of dropped me into that SDR role. And then my eyes were opened to sales as a career. And, thinking back now, I wish my university had a sales degree or sales specialization. We didn't, and I think most don't. We're starting to see some universities consider it, but it's still, the minority of universities. Even if we did have it, I don't think I would have taken it though. Looking back now, if I was to redo it, I would have. But in the moment, I don't think I would have. I remember I started a entrepreneurship club at a university called Startup Laurier to help other students start businesses. And the same year, the Laurier Sales Association was started from some other student. And I remember thinking, why is there a sales club? Is it a bunch of, used car salesmen that are, a little bit greasy? Because I think that speaks to the perception that a lot of people have, a lot of young people have about sales to this day, 8 years later, that they don't think sales is cool. They don't think sales is a great way to make money. They think of sales as slimy, even though, when you're on LinkedIn, you see all the great people that are in sales. But if you're outside of that bubble, you've got no idea. And I was talking this week to a professor who is a past head of sales, a past chief revenue officer, who decided to give that up and teach sales at one of the top business schools in the country here, and at Western University. And he was telling us that his students, he teaches the first sales course, only 10% of them actually go into sales, and most of them don't think it's cool. And that's one of the big reasons that they don't think it's cool. And so how do we, including you and I and others, that advocate for sales the right way, and we do it the right way, how do we change that perception so that young people, young Jackson, young Michael can consider sales? Maybe my son or daughter one day wants to consider sales. And so I think that's a big problem that I'm working on. I'm trying to at least make a dent in fixing that. And I know you are as well.
Yes. Michael, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think about this from time to time too. And I relate back to my experience. Sales has a bad rap, right? Hey man, this guy ripped me off. Hey man, this guy sold me shit I didn't need. Hey man, I went to a cell phone store and then he bumped up the price when I told him not to. Because majority of the people who are not in sales, they don't know what kind of sales are out there. And I didn't really find out about this true real profession until really when I entered the B2B sales space world. And it is totally separate. And I think that's where the gap is at, because you talk to people, and I'll give you a true story, right? This was about last November. So I'm in this club called Kids Work. It's a nonprofit club in Santa Ana. We help a lot of kids that's in poverty. And it was actually during the Christmas time, actually, I remember. So I sat on the desk. We were just helping people set up, like that's right. I think November. We're doing like set up Thanksgiving dinner stuff. And I met with some few cool people, they had like corporate jobs and stuff that too. And like, oh yeah, I do marketing. I do HR here. I do marketing over there. What do you do? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in sales development. Not sure if you're familiar. She's like, sales development? What's that? I was like, oh, not sure if you're familiar. It's B2B sales methodology that's highly practiced in tech and SaaS. And they're like, sales is sales, but that's a fancy word. I was like, whatever. So taking that example, right? Like if you were to go someone like you go in retail sales or even a car salesman, they think sales is sales, but it's not. It's not.
It's true, and I think colleges and universities actually teaching it is a great way to open more people's eyes to it, and I have no idea why decades ago and recently sales is not taught or never was taught in universities the way that marketing and operations and finance and accounting all are in business school, when so many people end up going into sales. And that's why I think everybody has a story and almost no one thought about going into sales. That's like a consistency. Every podcast I listen to, every webinar, no one ever wants to go into it initially, and somehow they ended up in it. And I think one reason that plays into that is that perception, but also that our post-secondary institutions don't actually teach it or have a program for it. And it ends up just being this career that people always fall into, whether you're a server at a restaurant, whether you're any other degree, you can end up in sales. But I think for SDRs to be successful, where a lot of them aren't set up for success because of their first-time managers, if they went through sales boot camp or SDR, an SDR program at university or college, imagine the over time, the perception changing about sales, and people considering it's a way to make a good living. It's a way to find fulfillment, and it's a great way to help people.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I love that, Michael. So you're an amazing sales leader and sales coach. I can already tell just from having our conversation. And I noticed you rolled out Galiano Ventures. Congratulations, by the way. Please tell us more about that.
I launched the consulting business in the middle or near the start of COVID, really after spending a lot of time in my free time on the weekends, helping people as much as I can who were struggling, people that lost their jobs, founders or CEOs that were struggling. And so I decided that I'll put this sole proprietorship together, and spend some time, maybe it's a couple hours per week, helping other people that need a bit of support, that need some of the expertise that I think I can offer around career coaching, and around sales process or sales coaching as well. And so I've spent some of my time over the last couple months helping both individuals with their career goals, both unpaid and paid as well, and started to turn that into a little side hustle or side business. And so I need to be mindful of my hours in the week as well, of course, and I have a full-time job, and so I'm always willing to help people. And then at a certain point as well, I want to be able to turn that into some additional income for me and my family. So that's what I did recently. It's
Nice.
not a big focus, but it's something that I think I joined a webinar that Lewis Howes. I've got his book here actually, The School of Greatness. Do you know Lewis Howes?
I am not. Please fill me in.
So he learned a lot from Tim Ferriss, and then he turned into a great teacher and influencer in his own right. But I joined one of his webinars at the start of COVID, which was all around building a side hustle. And I think even if you have a full-time role, it's important to have other opportunities to earn a living on the side, on the weekend, maybe at night, so that you can become recession-proof. And we saw so many companies struggle, startups go under, the worst unemployment in the US and Canada in decades. And so if you can become recession-proof, meaning, if the economy crashes, you can still earn a living, not necessarily by any one company, but just by yourself, by Jackson or by Michael, and you have your own brand, you're setting yourself up for the long term. And so I know that's something that's a little bit, it could be controversial for some companies. Can I build a personal brand? But I think the opportunity cost is too high that not doing so, not using the power of Twitter and the power of LinkedIn to be able to tap into any hobby and turn it into a side hustle, I think is a missed opportunity. So hopefully that gives people a bit more insight into what I've been thinking about and what they could do as well. Turn something that they care about or a hobby or something they find fun, and someone's probably willing to pay you for that.
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm so glad to hear you just say that, because this was exactly what I was expecting to happen when the COVID happened. And as you can see, like you said, a lot of people were getting laid off, right? SDRs, BDRs, SDR managers, and even VP and directors. And I told myself, like, there was a lot of people reaching out to me too, asking for help. And of course, I help them as much as possible, whether they're SDR, BDRs, but even managers and even VP and director levels. And I saw this thing just happening. It just clicked. And I told myself, I think this is going to be the era where they're going to go ahead and pivot for survival and take that risk and really just roll out their own consulting. So, and you can already see there's a lot of people out there rolling out their own consulting gig going on, whether it's teaching how to scale, training SDR and BDRs. And I really saw that, and, without further ado, it's actually happening.
It is. You're absolutely right. And I think, the two platforms I mentioned of Twitter and LinkedIn, those alone have so much opportunity within them that if you spend the time doing what you're doing, Jackson, giving value, and Justin Welsh always talks about this. You spend a year not asking for anything, just helping people for 12 straight months. The next year two, you'll have earned the right to ask people for a couple things, and then maybe 10 or 20% of your content is asking for something or monetizing that content. But you spend the first year just helping people, and you'll be able to get really far and build your own audience on LinkedIn and Twitter. I know this is a sales podcast, and I mentioned this on one other podcast. There's so much opportunity for salespeople on Twitter. There's very few salespeople on Twitter. That a lot of the biggest influencers on LinkedIn are also on Twitter, and they have very few followers. So it's pretty funny sometimes. You engage with someone that has 100,000, 50,000 followers on LinkedIn. They're trying to build their own following up from 1,000 on Twitter. But the point is that you can engage with anyone really easily on Twitter. And so I encourage more people to build a following by creating great content on Twitter specifically, not just reposting what they post on LinkedIn, but creating Twitter specific content. And there's a ton of people that are monetizing side hustles or consulting from Twitter alone. LinkedIn's a no-brainer, but Twitter is pretty incredible.
Yes. I love that. Okay. That's something that I'm going to have to be taking a stab at more too, and turn my focus into, is that Twitter. And I noticed that too. I know what you mean, because you look at their posts on LinkedIn and it's like got all these engagements, and then you jump in Twitter and you see them post the same thing, but it's like totally different, underutilized. But what that means is it's a great way to break through the noise if you're trying to reach out to them, because instead of just banging through that LinkedIn where there's a lot of engagement, you just ping them there. And the same goes for Facebook and even Instagram. I mean, it worked for me recently too, but that's for another story. But I know exactly what you mean. So it's pretty awesome. Michael, so I know we're running up the hour here, and I really want to dive deep into something. This is something fairly new. This is something that you're rolling out. This is something that you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears about. Please tell the audience what you were telling me, what you're rolling out, and what does it really mean to you?
For sure, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a bit more. So myself and a partner of mine, Charlie Locke, who's been a great mentor of mine. He was at Flashstock when we were both there together, which got acquired by Shutterstock. He was our VP of sales. We both worked together at #Paid. He's at another company now, and we both kind of been scratching at the same problem of SDRs not being set up for success when they go into their first full-time role. They usually don't have a good system in place because they have a manager that's never taught before. And so they've got no prior training or support going into that first-time role. And what often ends up happening is, because they don't have good coaching, they either fail in their role, they don't hit quota. The majority of SDR teams don't hit quota. or they drop out of sales, or they have a bad experience. Maybe they go into the AE role, but they don't succeed in that role because they didn't have a good foundation. And so that's a huge problem that we're looking to solve, where we've launched SDR Nation, which is a private Slack community. It's powered on Slack, private membership-based paid community for new SDRs to get the coaching that they deserve as an SDR. And we believe that as an SDR, you deserve a few main things. You deserve the right to external coaches that you can go beyond the manager that you have to get additional coaching to succeed. You deserve the right to tools, to best practices. You deserve the right to fair compensation, maybe equity, job security, and you deserve the right to career coaching and support to actually navigate your career. And a lot of SDRs don't get the support and don't know, how do I actually ever get promoted? And so we are rolling out this community. We've got some incredible founding coaches that are going to be teaching in this community, teaching SDRs across 5 or 6 key topics or themes that SDRs want to learn most about. And these coaches are going to be bringing fresh content every single week, delivering value every single day in this community. It is a paid community, but we believe that there are SDRs out there that will spend a little bit of money, probably as much as they're spending on a night out at the bar, to ensure that they're getting the coaching that they need to nail their role and eventually get to a promotion, whether that's AE or some other role. And coming out of COVID with this idea, learning is more important than ever, because you no longer are sitting next to 10 other SDRs. We're all at home by ourselves. And so learning is much more difficult, even with the daily SDR stand-ups that you might have. There's no in-aisle conversations. And so if you can be surrounded by other highly motivated, like-minded, top-performing SDRs or future top-performing SDRs, and then some of the best coaches delivering one-to-one and one-to-many coaching in the community, we have that barrier to entry to ensure that it's curated with high-quality members. Then we believe that starts to solve the problem around SDRs not being set up for success. And we hope that it can impact the problem you and I were talking about earlier around the perception of sales, because now you're not just limited to the manager that you have, but you can nail your role with the right coaching and the right community support.
Oh my God, dude, Michael, congratulations, man. That was amazing. I can see exactly what you're doing, and what more powerful thing to have than, hey, I have an external manager that has nothing to do, with what I'm doing now, like in terms of tying to work, but they can really just if they're, and there's a lot of SDR and BDR out there who feels like they're not getting the right coaching they deserve. They just want to be heard, and they want just proper feedback. And I can see how you guys will definitely solve that with your platform. And is this just going to be strictly just on Slack, or are you guys taking it to a different channel too as well for when they're trying to reach out?
Yeah, so we're at SDRnation.com. The community's powered on Slack, and then we'll also host exclusive content for the community outside of Slack in a content library or content hub that the members will have access to. So our membership is $49 per month, and our goal is to deliver a ton of value every single day, every single week for members that justify that $49. We know SDRs aren't the highest paid role in an organization. It's a starting salary. Maybe you've got some commission. And so we want to ensure that money is incredibly well spent, that you're getting quality advice. And I think that's one of the problems with some of the solutions in the space. Even on LinkedIn, there's no filter. Anyone can share advice. And so you've got a lot of, bad performers or bad managers out there that are also sharing bad advice, because there's no barrier, there's no filter. There's a lot of good ones, but there's also some bad advice. And so we're spending the time and put that barrier in place to ensure that SDRs are getting good is really important, because sometimes you don't know better about a question, and you might take some bad advice and go down a bad path, right? Or make a mistake, and there's a huge opportunity cost with that if you spend 3 months working on something based on some bad advice. So we're excited about this, and it's an area that I'm really passionate about. And as an SDR, those 14 months, I didn't have an SDR leader. I didn't have a coach. I didn't really have a system. And I was able to eventually succeed. But I think that looking back, I would have loved to have access to something like this and get to talk to other top performers or motivated SDRs at hundreds of other companies around the world, and get access to some of the best coaches to help me nail my job. We also want to make it really fun too. The SDR role is a hard role, and so we want to turn this community into a place that people can form some of the best relationships of their lives that will last for years. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I love it. And congratulations once again. Great way to break through the noise, because I have never would I thought of something like that too as well. There's nothing like that existing right now. And I think that's a great way, because that's just bridging another gap, so to say. Awesome. Well, Michael, I know we took enough of your time today, so we're just going to go ahead and just wrap things up here. I know you got a busy day going on. Thanks you again so much for hopping on the One Up Sales Development podcast. So if there's anyone right now listening to this episode, new young SDR, BDR, they want to reach out to you, say thank you, what's the best ways to do so?
For sure. You can reach out to me at michael@sdrnation.com, or feel free to find me on Twitter, M_Galiano, GAGLIANO, and definitely LinkedIn as well, Michael Galiano on LinkedIn. So I'd love to connect with people, hear what you liked from the episode. If I can help you at all, I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
There it is. Michael Galiano, thank you so much for hopping on with SDR Nation and hopping an episode with the One Up Sales Development podcast. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Jackson. I appreciate you as well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.